announcements? All good. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you. I declare the council meeting of the 9th of October 2018 open. It's 5 minutes past 1300, so 5 minutes past 1. I'll hand over to, hang on, we'll start with apologies. No apologies. I do understand there's a couple of members who do have to get away, but I think we'll be done by then, so we'll accept your apologies at that stage if you need to leave then. So moved by Councillor Mark, seconded by Councillor Jeff. All those for, any against, carried. Confirmation of agenda, moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Gary. All those for, any against, carried. I'll hand over to the Democracy Manager, Leanne. Are there any declarations of interest? No, there are none. Declared. So thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Andrew. Good afternoon, councillors and visitors. Today we are here to effectively hear submitters on the council's initial proposal for representation arrangements. There's no public forum, just to note for the record, and we have 4 submissions to be heard, which are going to happen in 3 groups, interestingly enough. So if I just call you forward in order, and if you'd like to come forward when your name or your group's called to the presenters table, please. The first group that are speaking, or the only group that are speaking this morning, are the group this afternoon. Oh, let's start again. I'd like to call forward and welcome the East-West by-election candidates, D. Fisher, R. McLeod, M. Small, M. Van Oosten, H. Henderson and M. Burgess, please. You have 10 minutes for your presentation. Now, councillors, Deborah Fisher has also put in a personal submission as an individual, which she tells us is essentially the same as the group submission. So she's going to include her personal submission with this group, noting that you may wish to ask questions of her as an individual as well as part of the group. So welcome all. You have 10 minutes. The bell will go at 7 minutes and then again at 10, so you know how timekeeping's going, and then me, Andrew, will entertain questions as appropriate at that point. Okay, you don't need to push the microphones, we'll operate those for you. Welcome.
So elected members, if you, in your hard copy, if you go to page 27, and that's the beginning of the written submission for this group. So the time is on the bottom right hand corner of the screen, and you'll see that counting down, and the clock won't start until you start. And I want to thank you for coming and making a verbal submission. Thank you.
So I'll start. You've got our written submission, and we all choose to speak our own words to support it. So, ngā mihi nui, kia koutou katoa, ko Maxine Van Oosten taku ingoa. I'm a Hamilton East resident and a Hamilton City Council ratepayer, and I stood as a candidate in the 2018 Hamilton City Council East Ward by-election. One of my primary reasons for standing was that I saw very little diversity in council in terms of that representation, in age, in gender, ethnicity or geography. Some of you don't even live in our city, and I wanted to rebalance that. I'm joined here today by some of my fellow candidates at that time, and we got together recently to debate the representation review and investigate some of the options. Thank you for giving us some time today to share our ideas and thoughts with you through this submission process. We looked at the current makeup of council and had trouble finding councillors who live in our part of town, Hamilton East, Hamilton Hillcrest, Fairview Downs and Fairfield. Our councillors who know our communities and who are familiar with our people, our interests and our needs. Sure, we have things in common with the wider Hamilton population like fair and reasonable rates, free water and waste, like our rubbish collection and access to our city-owned amenities. But we also have differences. And socioeconomically, we have lower incomes and lower home ownership rates. We want access to parks and leisure amenities. And we perceive a funding deficit for improvements and upgrades in our area. Our submission supports option 4 of the review, which proposes to split the northern part of the city into a northern ward and have a southwest and southeast ward as well. The majority of the city's growth is taking place in the north currently, and many of those residents who live there travel to the west for work. So the river is no longer a barrier or a boundary for them any longer. Our buses even go across those bridges too. 3 wards would provide a better spread for the candidates to stand in their ward with a better chance of being elected. Our group also debated and supported the desire to require candidates to be resident in their ward to be eligible to stand, although we know that's not being considered in this review. We support the current number of councillors at 12 plus a mayor, and that they would be split across those 3 wards, so 3 wards with 4 councillors each. The status quo suits the current councillors. You were all elected under it, and it's not surprising that you want to keep it. But we see its flaws and are keen to improve it. So we challenge you to opt for change and choose option 4. Thanks very much. I'll hand over to Matthew.
Good afternoon, Mayor and councillors. It's been such a privilege being part of this group that has so much passion for Hamilton. As a group, we decided the best thing for the future of council was to increase the number of wards from 2 to 3. Our group represents a broad range of people from different backgrounds. I'm a disability support worker. Others in the group is a stay-at-home mum, a tertiary education student, a grants writer for Epilepsy New Zealand, and a union organiser from the field officer employed by the NZEI. Hopefully I got that wrong. So if council went citywide, all of us would struggle here to pay for the extra costs, including flyers, billboards and so on. And a lot of these people have families and kids to feed and on fixed incomes, so yeah. The question I want to ask is to the 2 councillors that were on council at the time, when you went down to 2 wards from 3 wards, what were the reasons? Thank you.
My name is Deborah Fisher, and I stood in the East Ward by-election because I did not see my community reflected on council. In the 2016 elections, 7 out of 12 councillors were elected from 1/3 of the city. In the 10 years and 4 elections we've had with only 2 wards, there have been 43 candidates from within the East Ward. 20 have been from the northern suburbs and 23 from the southern suburbs. All being fair, with an even split of those standing, you would expect there should be an even split of elected members. Of the 13 individuals elected to council, 11 have been from the north. with only 2 incumbents from the previous South Ward elected from the South. LGNZ says voting behaviour is influenced by a number of factors, such as the level of education, age, civic literacy and length of time that a person has lived in the same address. While I do not have the stats to back it up, it is a well-known fact that low-income areas with low home ownership have low voter turnout. Why? Let's start with the fact that you refer to voters as ratepayers. The general perception in the greater community is that ratepayer equals homeowner. Therefore, many tenants switch off thinking this is not something they can or should participate in. So please stop calling residents and voters ratepayer. It might go a long way to improving participation. Elections are not decided based on the number of registered voters. They are decided by those that choose to exercise their right to vote, and the northern suburbs have a higher proportion of active voters. While our communities may have lower turnout, that does not mean that we do not have active voters or community leaders willing to represent us. We deserve the opportunity to elect representatives from our community, but the large number of active voters in the northern suburbs will generally decide on our behalf who is elected to represent the East Ward. Furthermore, people are most likely to vote for those that are from their community because they reflect their community. The current councillors that more closely reflect my community are not from the East Ward. LGNZ also says an established pattern found in New Zealand is that turnout tends to be higher in local governments with smaller populations. In short, as councils become larger, turnout declines on average. My research suggests that it is not the size of council, but the size of the ward that affects turnout. Every outcome sought to improve the current system from diversity to participation would benefit from smaller wards. Since I wrote my submission, I have been trying to find an obvious way to show that the communities to the north of Hamilton are different from those to the south. The statistics and descriptions provided in council papers would seem to make this obvious, but many will still claim there is not enough difference to justify another ward. If our currently elected members are not willing to bring themselves or their families into our communities, I question how effective they are at representing those communities. The suburbs to the north and those to the south are different communities. Just ask anyone living in them.
Kia ora koutou, my name is Horiana Henderson, and we would also like to give apologies on behalf of Miliane Burgess. She wanted to be here but was unable to be. Each of us stood in the earlier by-election because we wanted to represent our different communities. We each still differ on many points, but on wanting 3 wards, not 2 and not an at-large ward. We want 3 wards established. On this, we agree, and that's why I'm a part of this joint submission. And I think that's enough for me.
Excuse me. I encourage you to keep going if you want to. I'm going to let the clock run just so that you can get
just
your message
quickly,
across. Thank you.
so based on community characteristics in the north, it shows that there are low levels of deprivation, high incomes, wealthy, people are wealthier and they are aged over 65, own their homes, identify as European and vote. In the east where I live, and based on my own circumstances, I'm not wealthy, I'm under 65, my family barely own about 10% of our home because the rest is owned by the bank, 90%. I am of Ngāti Maniapoto, Ngāti Raukawa, Ki Te Tonga, and Ngāti Ruanui descent. I identify as Māori. I value my vote, but I know that many of my family, my friends and community don't feel the same way and they don't vote. An at-large ward would mean that based on when I campaigned, that I would struggle to be able to connect with people. But if it was localised to my community, I would have more capability of doing that. I know that based on the fact that my family, my husband, my children, and our friends and family walked around the streets canvassing our area as much as we could on foot. I couldn't do that across the whole of the city. And you know, we rang up to find out about distribution. That costs a lot of money. Financially, that is a barrier, you know. these are part of our points. Our points are we don't want barriers to people standing as candidates, and we don't want barriers to our community being able to connect with those people and being reflected on council, which is what we hope we would see here on council, is the different communities that make up Hamilton reflected here. And the communities that make up Hamilton are not all over 65. They do not all own houses. They are not all wealthy. They do not all vote. But if we keep these wards smaller, like we're asking you to do, then we have a better shot at doing that. Thank you.
Thank you, Horiana. That's great. Could we hear from your last member, please?
Do you want to say?
I wasn't sure if I could make it today, so I wasn't preparing a statement.
Do you?
No,
Okay, lovely, thank you. Okay, we'll go to questions. Start with Councillor Paula.
Thank you, Mayor Andrew. I just have 3 questions along the same theme. So you're saying that if there were smaller wards in the state, let's just take, for since you identified that there aren't any candidates from the southeast, if you, you're saying if you had a southeast ward, you're more likely to get someone who's representative of the people who live in the southeast, but not necessarily, but potentially.
Not necessarily, but people do pay attention to where you live. At the moment, if you are in the East Ward, it's the East Ward. If there was a North and a South, then people would pay attention to that, and they will vote for somebody from within their local community that is there. And they are doing it now. The problem is there's just not enough of them.
Okay, so
We've got voters supporting us.
Because at the moment, there is no requirement on any voting material to say where you live, but other than you live in the city.
There isn't any requirement, but the research does show that where candidates live does matter to a,
You have to have an address.
a majority of voters.
Yeah, I'm just reacting to council. That you live in the city, you don't have to say you live in, I don't have to tell people I live in Harrowfield or anything, I just have to say in the ward. Yeah, that's right, that's what I'm saying. So this would...
If I could just add, in terms of campaigning, it helps to define a smaller area. It becomes more manageable, and therefore you've got more of an opportunity, if you choose to door knock, to be able to get around, a
Okay, so I was going to come to that whole electioneering bit afterwards, but I was just thinking about how you get a representation of your local community. In your view, just so I'm clear about it, is if you get somebody standing from the southeast and they're successfully elected as a southeast candidate, they're more likely to be representative of the people who live in the southeast, more connected.
Not necessarily, because there's nothing to require that.
So that was going to be the second part of my question. So that's the comment you made, Maxine, was if you are required to live in your ward, then you're going to get a greater chance of having someone who lives in the local community representing the local community. Is that your view?
Yeah.
Thank you. And that,
So just to be clear to members, that's not, the legislation prohibits that from happening, so it's not part of today's conversation.
I'm just trying to understand what they
It's
said.
just clearly not part of today. Okay.
Yeah, I'm just trying to understand what the views you said were.
Sorry, can I just point out, we realise that there is no requirement that you must live within the ward, but the research does show, and a lot of people out there say, that it matters to them when they choose to vote whether or not you are local. And by having a smaller ward, it is much easier to identify those localities. The people in the south do vote, and they are voting for us. There's just not enough of them to outvote those in the north.
Okay, yeah, that's what I wanted to get to. My other question was, I guess. Oh no, well I think that's fine. I guess when you're elected to council, you become a representative for the whole city at that point. But you're saying where your roots are makes a difference to the local community. I have strong roots in the Hamilton East Hillcrest area because I lived there for until my children were 20 or 22 or something. But I get what you're saying. You get known for that, known for where you live, don't you? Okay. Thank you.
Councillor Dave.
Thanks. The 2 parts. One, Matthew asked a question which I was one of 2 councillors targeted at, along with Angela, I think. When, at the time that the proposal came in to shift from 3 wards to 2 wards, a number of us proposed that we actually go to 4 wards. And there were other people, including the mayor at the time, Michael Redmond, who proposed we go to at large. What happened was there was a horse trading and a compromise, and that's why you end up with the particular animal you've got now. So it wasn't necessarily, there was logic on both sides, and you're going to hear that in the submissions. So just a bit of background. There was also, with 3 wards, there was a complaints from people from Melville that the representatives, who all happen to live in the Hillcrest, Hamilton East area, didn't know, just the same as your complaints, didn't know Melville and Glenview, for instance. So it was, they felt it was crazy having a ward split across 2 rivers, which is a question I want to ask you about. You want to put, or suggesting, we put Rotatuna in with St Andrews and Puketi, thereabouts.
Based
Now,
on the papers that...
the population.
No, based on the demographics and the papers that were presented to council that show that those communities in the north, including the ones on the west, are more similar than the ones in the south. Those came from your papers. Your papers that identified the 3 wards show that the west ward is...
What makes you think, I understand your points about the East Ward, absolutely, and would agree with them, but what makes you think that there isn't a similar issue on the West Ward, except in the reverse? I mean, the social housing areas of St Andrews, for instance, and the similarities with, say, Norton and Melville. They're all in the same ward at the moment.
Look, ideally, I'd love to see 12. But
saw that.
that was not something that we thought would even be considered. So we settled on the 3 wards as the next best option, as a possibility of even being considered. That's the reason why we settled on 3. Wasn't ideal and it wasn't what we all wanted, but that was the one that we came to council with, thinking that it was the most likely to be considered.
What about a 4 ward with the accepting the split you're talking about on your side, but the equivalent split on the other side?
Yep. Maybe. Like I said, so long as it's more wards, we need more community, we need smaller groups. People that get engaged when there is smaller communities, they tend to relate to those communities. Your own papers show that there are 12 communities of interest. Ideally, you'd want 12 wards. That's not going to happen, so
I think
we're just looking for something better than what we've got, basically.
It also, I think, builds up quite nicely alongside the debate that's happening currently about the general election split and the growth of our city and how that might work as well. So,
and one of the complaints from northern parts of Rotatuna is that they've been included in Hamilton West, and they're nothing like Hamilton West.
Kia ora.
I guess I'm asking you as well, don't you think the river is actually a traditional split, both culturally, historically and recently in Hamilton?
Based on the deprivation index map that we looked at, it just showed there's 2 colours that are quite strong on that map, and they are green and they are red. And so in the north, there is a concentration of green, and the green means that the level of deprivation is very low in the north, and that's not the same in the west or in the east.
I don't think you've walked around delivering leaflets in parts of Puketi and St Andrews that I have.
Yeah, I've door knocked them, actually.
Yeah, but that's just based on...
Like I said, ideally, smaller wards would be better. And those communities obviously are not necessarily going to identify with the east, but if 3 wards is better than 2.
Yeah.
And that was the best split that we could come up with, was the one that was suggested, that showed that all of those northern wards were very similar, including the ones on the west.
We used to have 5 wards until 1998.
I know.
3 of them were on the west.
You must be an old one.
In any
We can hope.
situation, no matter how narrow you define your wards, you're going to have differences in your communities. I live opposite Southall School.
Oh, wow.
1 block from me, it's a much rougher community than literally the other side of my block is a rougher community than my side of the block.
Yeah.
So you're always going to have that issue.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks.
Councillor Mark.
Thank you. Just a couple of questions. Okay, pertaining to the east, why do you think, I mean, looking at this group, why do you think there are no councillors from Hillcrest or I'm actually Fairfield, just for the record. just. Why is that? Are you saying it's because...
It's because we do not look like or sound like we are from the suburbs that have a different demographic to ours, and the voters in those suburbs do not relate to us and do not feel that we represent them, so they don't vote for us. Our community do vote, but we are being outvoted by a numbers. It's a numbers game. We have the votes. Our community is getting the people. We've got the candidates. We've got the voters. But there is more people voting in the north because of the demographics. And when they look at us, they don't see their community reflected in the people that are speaking to them.
And the councillors that live there too.
Also, stats show that in the 2016 elections, the highest number of votes came out of Hamilton East.
Right.
However, there are more parts to the northern part of Hamilton where there are voters. So,
Hang on, so
there were fewer.
there were
in
more
other
votes that came out of
parts.
Hamilton East,
Yep.
but there are no Hamilton East candidates, but you're saying...
You
if
mean
you
the
come from
Hamilton East, you mean the East
So
Ward,
if you have
sorry.
a look at the other suburbs in the city that are higher voting,
Yeah.
Chartwell, the northern part of Hamilton,
Yeah.
all of those areas that sit above that Fairfield area feature highly in that
Right.
the northern newer areas, and that's because people are plugged in to vote, and even though we're talking 30-something% of people who voted, so we've got a real problem, not just in what our representation is, frankly, but all of the other things that sit around the voting as well, and how we might be able to reconnect with voters and
Yeah, it's a
motivate
whole new...
them to vote.
Yeah, I understand that. Thank you.
So, and I know that that's not a part of this review, but I think
Okay.
that even though it isn't, it does have an impact.
All right. So can you give us an example? Well, in fact, could you give me 3 examples, actually, because everyone could just pick a hobby horse, but can you give us an example where this group of councillors would have made a better decision had we lived in those areas that didn't get represented in the last election?
Just recently, I've become aware of issues regarding many of the playgrounds in our area that have been waiting and on the list and still waiting and still on the list for the last 10 to 20 years.
I live in that area.
However, though, it seems to be that they are still on the list while many of the northern areas are being bumped up the list, to be quite honest.
Okay.
Yeah, look, and let me give you another example, actually. I talked a little bit about perceived lack of funding that goes into that area. That also speaks to the parks. I think a really key part of that is our river plan. Actually, just last week we purchased buildings as a city to develop further the Mayor's Park in town, and there's no money going into my Wellington Street beach, which is 100 metres up the road from me, that I have to scramble down with my grandchildren in order to be able to enjoy it. And we're able-bodied. Now imagine any kind of disability. You simply cannot use that area. So, that's a screaming example to you about how, those decisions could be different.
Okay.
And I would, and an example, rather than a specific example, I'll counter your question.
Yeah, sure.
With a broader example, was that if for the term of this council, a committee in Wellington had granted every single decision that you had granted over that period of time, would you still feel represented?
Hang on, ask the question again.
If a committee in Wellington made every decision and that this council in that period of time has made in exactly the same manner, would you feel represented?
I'm from Fairfield, I'm having trouble understanding.
If somebody in Wellington
If
decided
someone made the same
everything,
decisions as you have made,
Yeah.
would you feel like you had an equal input into those decisions?
Are we discussing it or...?
I'm just using that
Yeah, no, I
as a
appreciate the point.
generalised example of...
Okay,
of
interesting. All right, I'll get into the debate otherwise.
Thank you, Councillor Mark. Deputy Mayor Marsden.
Maintaining an open mind, I think, certainly acknowledge the seriousness of the 3-ward option. And if we look at the West Ward, in fact, there's at least 4 or 5 councillors, 4 councillors in the southeast as it is. But the question I want to ask you is about legislation, and I know, and I'm just trying to work out the genuine concern versus the fact that in law an MP doesn't have to live in her or his constituency, and in law a councillor doesn't have to live in her or his area.
Yeah.
And on the voting booklet, it clearly states that you do not live in the ward, and we have one councillor, not wanting to unduly personalise this, that's been elected for nearly 20 years on that basis. Should it be, should the law make that choice, or should the residents make that choice of who they want?
Since that's not actually something that can be discussed, at least let the residents make that choice. At the moment, the residents can't make that choice because they can't distinguish where anybody's from in the east.
No, but with respect, on the voting booklet, and this is really important that we're dealing with fact,
Yeah.
in the voting booklet, black and white
Yeah.
in bold, this candidate does not live in the ward.
Yes.
So there's a clear declaration.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I understand that. And I've been told by many people that that actually makes a difference to how they vote. The first thing they do is go through and they select ones that they won't vote for somebody outside their area. Obviously, some people do, I get that. But to a lot of people, that does make a difference. And at the moment, if you are from the East Ward, there is no way of knowing which community within the East Ward you are actually from.
Sure. So if you have a smaller ward, it's more easy to
Determine how close and how local they are.
The other thing too about community of interest and where you work, you might, and I do in my case, not want to live in my humble part of my ward, but you work and you live. Now where you sleep could be totally different to where you work and have your passion. We have a council member who's a life member of the Western Community Association. They made him a life member because of his sheer dedication to that patch, and he keeps getting elected, yet he doesn't technically live in that area.
But the reason he keeps getting elected is because he is part of that community.
Right.
And they identify that. And they identify that. Okay, sorry, but that's exactly it. The community identifies that, that input. They identify the person as being part of their community. And if you don't actually individually know those people and they're not known to you around as councillors, or you haven't been involved with the particular groups that they've been dealing with, what you fall back on is where they live. When it's somebody you don't know.
Sure. So basically, in
Deputy
summary,
Mayor.
the more wards,
Deputy
the
Mayor,
closer you get to your community.
Excuse me, Martin.
Yep.
Very direct questions, please. We're just direct questions.
So what I get is if you have a smaller ward system, 3 or 4 or 5, you increase, do I get this, the opportunity of an elected member to be intimately involved with the neighbourhoods in that ward.
Yes.
That's really the
Yes.
crutch.
Yes.
Thank you.
Councillor Angela.
To your group for coming together. I found your submission excellent. It's probably not a way you wanted to be in the chamber, but congratulations. So it's clear that what your group is seeking, the reasons that you're seeking more wards are for diversity and better representation. And we know that obviously, and we've had a discussion, that legislation isn't going to change or hasn't changed around past identifying whether you're in a ward or not. And Deborah, you've just articulated that if we have more wards and your preference or your submission is for 3, it kind of narrows the scope because of that statement in the booklet that says I don't live in my ward or I do live in my ward. How would that stop? So let's say at the end of this process and we make the decision and deliberate on the 1st of November, the council decides to go for either 3 or 4 wards. If we do that, how would that stop still a whole lot of candidates from the northeast of the city still, because you know you could live in Christchurch and run for Hamilton City Council.
Yep.
So how would that impact and get the outcome you're looking for, better representation and more diversity?
Because I personally feel that much like us not representing those from the northern suburbs, that unless you are part of our community, like Councillor McPherson is in the west, unless you are part of that community will identify whether or not what you are saying resonates with them. And just like we don't resonate with the residents in the north, I think that anybody from the north standing in our community would probably face similar sort of judgment as in whether or not they actually reflect the community that they are standing for.
Right, so Matthew, did you have something you wanted to add?
What we could do is write what suburb you live in.
Yeah.
You
Well, we could,
but-
candidates can offer that now.
I think, Angela, what it does,
Well, it could be.
it doesn't stop people from living wherever you want to and standing in an electorate. Nothing stops that. What it does allow is a smaller patch to electioneering and a smaller area to be known and to get known by people, and that makes it easier for somebody that's in that area to be elected.
Yeah.
If you have with it a larger part of the city that also has ability to elect from that candidacy, that pool, then you have a lower ability to be elected.
And I think from what I've picked up from all of that in your submission is that you would believe that if that happened, if we went for 3 or 4 wards and we still got a northeast representative running in that area, that possibly that community would react differently, because what you're saying is it's a smaller geographical area, and then voters would then look at that candidate and go, actually, do you really represent us? So it might be tougher for them, right?
Yes.
And people my age, they don't get out and vote. So if someone's representing them from the university area, then maybe they might take some notice.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Gary.
Thank you, and thank you for your presentation. Ultimately, the question of representation is decided on 2 things: who's allowed to stand and who's allowed to vote. So your concern is that the people that you seek to represent don't vote.
No, they don't. There's not enough.
Yeah,
of
well, that's
them
the same
voting.
thing, isn't it? Yeah.
It doesn't mean that they don't vote. It doesn't mean that they don't care, and
Okay.
it doesn't mean
I'll
that they
rephrase
don't want leaders.
rephrase the question. And not enough of the people that you seek to represent
Yeah.
vote.
Yes.
So whose fault's that?
Well, stop calling them ratepayers and putting tenants off of voting and thinking that they don't participate. That's a
You
good
really
start.
think that stops a person from
It
voting?
does. A lot of people in the lower demographics and the lower income areas, they shift around a lot. They are rentals. The LGA says that if you have a stable place that you're at, that you're more likely to be paying attention. Education plays a part. A lot of our area is not highly educated. They are tenants. There's a lot of reasons why people in our community aren't voting. But there are also a lot of people that are voting.
Are there things that we or the law could do to make, you can't make people vote, but surely if they were interested, surely if they had a vested interest.
Excuse me, Councillor Gary, that's just right off track. That's not what this paper's about. We're not talking about legislation.
The submitters are telling us that
Gary,
yeah.
we're not talking about legislation to force people to vote.
No,
That's
no,
not
neither
what we're
am I.
about. Unless
Neither am I.
you're leading back to something that directly
Yep.
is in this today.
Well, I'm challenging the proposition that's been put to us that people will only vote for people who live next door. So
Not
if I
only.
wanted to get, and someone used the word about a rough neighbourhood, so if I wanted to get votes from the rough neighbourhood, I'd wear ripped jeans and have a black eye every time I stood up on the podium or something, would I? And then
No.
Gary, what's your question?
Well, I'm just trying to say that isn't the answer in your own hands. It's in the hands of your people, your residents,
If I may answer
or
that,
your voters. Beg your pardon.
in a similar manner in which I replied to Mark's, in a general sense. If, say, in the Hamilton East community, I'm throwing out random numbers, if, say, 80% of the people voted, and in the northern community, which is larger, 50% of the people voted, but it's all the same district, and the population in the group that voted for 50% is higher than the total number of the people who voted 80% in that group, the 80% vote would still go with whatever the other group voted.
Yeah, our wards are set up to be relatively the same number of voters.
No, same number of registered voters, not same number of actual voters.
Yeah, but if people
And
are
that's
not
what
going
makes
to
the
register
difference.
vote, is that the subject of this type of discussion, or is there another subject there? There is another discussion to
There
be
are
had.
voters in our community, they do vote, they do care, but we can't get the numbers. We are outnumbered by the fact that due to demographics such as education, income, home ownership, how long you've lived in a place, those sorts of things make a difference to whether or not somebody chooses to vote. And our community is full of those facts. So a lot of our community don't vote because they fall into those categories.
So how will anything change that?
Oh, you could go to, but you could also
Online
go
voting.
to electronic voting.
But the system
think
would be
that'll make
different
it-
in the fact that if we had, that would mean that the people in our community that are voting, their vote would actually count, because at the moment it counts for nothing. We are outnumbered. It does not matter. If we had one elected representative that everybody in our suburb voted for, we'd still be hard pushed to get onto council because there's still more voters in the north. We're in the same ward. It makes no difference.
So you're now talking about majority vote and things like that, aren't you? Pardon?
We're talking about a 3-ward system and not sticking with the 2-ward system, not going to at-large. We're talking about a 3-ward system because we feel that our communities would have a better fighting chance to be represented on council. That's what we're talking about. We're not talking about a whole heap of different things. We're talking about that. That's all. 3-ward system. And because the demographic is quite different in the north from what it is in the east where we live and what it is in the west. So that's what we're talking about. We can't divvy up everything so that it's perfectly arranged, but based on some information that we received, you know, in the staff papers and from the census, we can see that there are some areas that are different and our areas are different, and we see 3 wards as a good start to helping diversity come to council and helping more representation come to council and helping us so that when people like us want to stand for election, we have a fighting chance against people from the north. So people from the north can campaign in the east or the west, but we have some kind of fighting chance. Because we're local.
Thank you.
Councillor Ryan.
Thanks for your submission. Juliana, you raised the point about a smaller area makes your money go further, essentially.
Yeah.
What if someone's got a $10,000 budget across the east of the city and you chop that ward in half, and now they're going to spend that 10 grand in an even more concentrated area? Wouldn't that...
Well, I don't know that dynamic because that's not my dynamic, but I can base it.
Unfortunately, the campaign spend is based on the population. If you cut the population, you cut the spend.
Make everyone more.
It does. They don't have 10. If you cut the ward in half, they no longer have 10,000 to spend because there's less population. The amount of campaigning spending goes down relative to the amount of population, isn't it?
40,000 to 30,000, unfortunately.
And so you can still buy.
Which is why we want smaller wards. Obviously, we want more than 3. It doesn't make much of a difference, but it does make a difference.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, East-West by-election candidates. Appreciate you coming in, and I think you've done the best you could to get your message across, so appreciate that. And also appreciate the diversity in your group. Okay, Democracy Manager Leanne.
Thank you. Now, our next submitter today is Judy McDonald. Judy, would you like to come forward to the presenter's desk? Judy has an individual submission, so you have 5 minutes and the bell will go at 3 minutes.
Much as I deeply sympathise with most of the members of the previous group, I'm afraid coming at it from a completely different angle. As I stated in my submission, and which does seem to be something of a preference in the majority of submissions from the documents that I saw, I actually support the at-large election of councillors and the abolition of the ward system. Most of the significant matters that affect Hamilton and its future aren't actually related to which side of the river you live on. They're connected with major expenditure, construction and maintenance of infrastructure, and the general future direction of the city. I'm a lifelong Hamiltonian. I'm very tired of being unable to vote for people that I consider ideal candidates to help govern my city because they happen to be standing in a ward that I don't live in. I generally actually vote for considerably fewer than the nominal number of people that I'm allowed to vote for, because I don't actually think that I want most of them. Sorry, folks. Unfortunately, of course, that's right. Or possibly I do. Generally speaking, of course, there are many people, I think, who feel like me and who don't actually vote for the full numbers. We get what we get anyway. And I think that one of the problems that was being addressed by the previous group, that people living in the south compared to the north are often badly represented because there is an over-representation of people from high socioeconomic areas. One of the reasons that I often get very agitated is that, being considerably left-leaning myself, often, for some reason, the candidates I would like to support live in the west. And I think that this would often provide people, regardless of where they are in Hamilton, if they were allowed to vote for candidates at large, they would have a better chance of electing people who really fitted better with their own mindset. We were also asked about the existing number of councillors. I think that the current 12 is probably about right, though it might be desirable to change it slightly so that the mayor doesn't have a casting vote. Very frequently we have mayors who have fairly strong agendas of their own. That's why people stand for mayor. They do have strong opinions. An uneven number would actually prevent that casting vote being used so frequently. The alternative would be to remove the mayor's ability to have a casting vote at all. And in the event of a tie, councillors would have to fight it out between them at rather more length, which might be useful in terms of coming to sensible decisions about what works for the community at large. There was also a comment about community boards, which I have my doubts that they would be helpful. I think they would merely add another level of potential confusion to the whole system. However, I do think it would be helpful to have councillors who hold regular clinics in the same way that MPs do, so that they can talk to the people they nominally represent, and they can get a much clearer idea of what those people actually want and need. We need for that councillors who aren't operating to their own agenda, who are genuinely concerned about the issues facing Hamilton as a whole. And it might be important to have ongoing support for elected councillors in this regard to help them understand the problems a lot of people face. Given the sheer volume of paper that comes across your desks on a regular basis, I think having a research assistant or 3 available might be a very good idea. I would also like to briefly address an area which comes into what the previous group was saying. It's not directly related perhaps, and it's by no means specific to Hamilton, but it has a large influence on who gets elected, regardless of what ward they're in. It's money. Most of those elected to office have been able to spend significant amounts of money on promoting their cause. There have been some very able people standing in the past who don't have that kind of money available to them. And unfortunately, if you can't put up lots of billboards that look professional, it does have an influence. It really does. We could improve the situation by setting a much lower limit on advertising budgets for elections, which would perhaps mean that people would have to then be equalised somewhat and rely a lot more on door-knocking public meetings, generally trying to get themselves known within the community. Yes, that may be a dream that can't be realised. It would also be helpful if the local press could be more useful and more informative, focusing on actual issues rather than, as we had in the last election, what candidates have got in their fridge. Thank you.
Thank you, Judy. Councillor Dave.
Thanks very much, Judy. And I can very much appreciate why an East Ward voter might prefer to vote for some of the West Ward candidates. But what about the view that the last group put that local is best because people are familiar and embedded in, and therefore a better chance of representing, let's put it that way?
Well, if you look at the actual numbers of people involved, the difference between 3 wards and 2 wards is going to be not a lot in terms of trying to get yourself known, I feel. I sympathise with their statement of saying, well, 12 would be a good idea, because that way you may be able to get known within your own ward. Hamilton's population is what, around 160,000 now?
That was 5 years ago.
Yeah, all right, it's
171.
closer to 200 maybe. So what we're looking at is, are you going to be able to rush out and make yourself known to 50,000 people or 60,000 people? Is it going to make a difference? Maybe not.
So maybe if it was a greater number of wards than that, you might start to come round to that.
It would need to be, I think, a significantly greater number of wards, and the organisational problems associated with that may be very large indeed.
Hamilton has in the past had a single citywide ward.
Yeah.
Have you heard of the comment River Road syndrome?
Oh, yeah, the
Where
wealthy get elected.
almost all of the people elected in the citywide have actually had River Road addresses?
Well, we still suffer from it to a large extent.
Okay.
I don't know that you're going to make a lot of difference unless you have, as I say, a very large number of wards. We are still going to get wealthy areas with people who've got a lot of money and a lot of influence, and it tends to be well established that people with money know the value of voting, unfortunately.
So talking about money, the spending cap for citywide is 60,000 for a council candidate, the same as for mayor.
Yeah, it should be cut drastically, I suspect.
Which we have no choice over because it's national legislation.
Yeah, I mean, that is something that would probably need to go to national consideration. I was only throwing it in as a, well, this is one way around the problem,
So
perhaps.
smaller wards have lower spending caps. Does that even the playing field at more?
No, because I think the entire spending limit is too high anyway, and bringing it down because it's a smaller ward is not going to achieve a great deal.
Okay. So it has to be a really big change
A big
before you
change.
go away from citywide.
Yeah, I think so.
Thanks.
Deputy Mayor Martin.
But, you know, obviously, as I will test all submitters' arguments, and it does come back to the funding. So you have an at-large system, and you might have up to 50, 60 candidates standing across the city. As you know, it's all randomised, so every individual elector gets a different order of names. Don't you think that a high-profile name with a big budget is going to have huge advantage? Doesn't the at-large make it even worse than what we have at present?
I doubt that it makes it worse. It already is the case that people with a high profile, a public profile, and the ability to afford lots of advertising, they're already virtually guaranteed a place. Outsiders will always have difficulty, and outsiders with not much money will have a huge amount of difficulty. That's my general impression. Yes, it may make it slightly worse. Alternatively, it may make it slightly better by allowing people who are currently excluded from voting for example, some very good candidates in the West, which seems to happen annoyingly often, that people on the East, no matter how much they would like to support them, can't. So my thought is very much, we've got a problem anyway. We will always have a problem as long as those spending caps remain high. And yes, I acknowledge that that's a national issue, not a local one. But I'm not sure that we're going to improve matters very much by having more wards.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Mark.
Judy, thank you for your excellent presentation. The casting vote issue, is it actually a casting vote or just the mayor's casting vote? Because the reason I'm asking for that is I've been through several committee meetings recently.
Excuse me, councillor, you're just way out of scope. It's all right
I'm
for
just
someone
questioning what she said.
Excuse me, it's okay for someone to talk about it, but it's not anything we can change today. This is not what we're talking about.
Okay, I'm out. Thanks.
Sorry, it's
No
just out of scope. Councillor Ryan.
Thanks, Chair. I don't know if Deputy Mayor just touched on this, so apologies if I'm repeating, but you talked about community boards can add another layer of complexity, Judy, potentially, and more confusion. Already we have low voter turnout, we've got confusion, we've got the City Council, the DHB, the Regional Council, so there's all this overwhelm for people. If we went at large and potentially you've got 50 candidates to choose from, is that potentially going to add to that?
It does link somewhat to the previous question. You may or may not get 50 candidates. It's anybody's guess what would actually happen in a citywide election, I have to say. But I think even if we did, the problem is not going to be magnified that much. If people are already bewildered with the number they've got on one side of the city, they're going to be still bewildered. And those who are not bewildered have at least got a better choice. There are problems on both sides. Yes, it is the responsibility of the people who are eligible to vote to at least acquaint themselves as far as they can with what's going on. there are lots of reasons why lots of people don't and can't, and I fully appreciate that. I'm not trying to suggest that everybody's got the same opportunity to become familiar with stuff. But I think you might stand a better chance of getting more people actually able to exercise their preferences with a citywide system.
Thank you.
That's all.
Councillor Paula.
So my question is around, do you believe then, because you were saying that you might like to vote for someone who is quite good but not in the same ward as where you live. So you consider that merit/skills, I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, I'm just trying to understand what the basis of that is more important to you than a footing in the local community, or is it a bit of both?
It is a bit of both. Mainly, as I said at the beginning of my submission, what I think affects Hamilton most severely are citywide issues. We are dealing with major changes to infrastructure. We've got growth all over the place, which I don't necessarily approve of, but we're stuck with it. We've got what is the general direction of the city. We've got to deal with infrastructural problems which are very expensive. Those are not confined to one side of the river or the other. And for that reason, I think there's a much better argument in many respects for saying, let's just vote citywide on the basis of people who have the best ideas and the best notions of how to deal with this.
Okay, so if by stroke of fate, because of that, all of the candidates lived on the west side, that wouldn't be a particular flaw from your point of view, or it would just be a consequence?
If they were thoroughly competent people who had really good ideas for the city, I really wouldn't care where they came from.
Okay, and so your solution to providing for local input is through things like councillor clinics, councillor attendance at local events and things like that.
Because that is part of what a councillor should be doing, keeping in touch with the city they live in. I think people would rapidly gain a fairly good impression of who was actually involved with their community or not, and that would certainly influence the next election.
Given that some communities actually do that a lot better than others in terms of inviting you to things. But yeah, okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Councillor Angela.
Thank you. Thanks, Judy, for a great submission. So the outcome that it feels like you're going for citywide at the moment, because you're wanting more choice, and the reason for that choice is better diversity? Yes,
in that, as I say, it's a matter of accident in some respects where a good candidate arises. It's unfortunate if all the ones that many people feel are capable and would do a good job for the city are somewhere they can't vote for. Because essentially their vote is, well, at least half wasted. They can vote for the ones in their own ward that they think are appropriate, but the people that they would also like to have had there, they can do nothing about.
And if, but you also talked about a preference being even more wards. So what would be what's your utopia, Judy?
I mean, a utopia is unattainable, obviously. You would hope that you've got all your voters thoroughly informed, and that you've got candidates who genuinely are interested in the well-being of the people in their community. Now, my hope would actually be that anyone who stands citywide has a pretty good idea of what's going on in this city, not just what's going on in their expensive suburb or possibly even their very deprived suburb, but a good idea of what's going on all over it. And that's the kind of candidates that I would like to see and I would like to vote for. I think most people would be happy to see candidates who have the greater good of the wider community at heart. And being able to access those people through things like regular community clinics would allow people who've got problems to actually say, hey, this isn't working, what can you do about it?
But do you have a number of when you've talked about more wards, do you have a specific number?
I don't.
You don't?
No, as I say, I would prefer an at-large system where you're not restricted, to be honest.
Oh, okay.
But if you are going to have wards, I think you would probably need to go for quite a lot of them.
Okay, I understand now. Great, thank you.
Councillor Robb.
Yeah, thanks, Chair, and thanks, Judy, for your submission and coming in to present today. My question follows on from the Deputy Mayor's question about, and an observation, the last two elections we've had between 40 and 50 candidates in the 2 wards
Yeah.
for councillor positions.
Yeah.
Do you think if we had an at-large system and we had, let's say, that same number again, and the voters had to choose 12 from a list of 50, that they may well throw their hands up in despair and not vote at all, given the length of time it's going to take to read the book, as well as find within that list the 12, up to 12 candidates that they would prefer to have?
It's always a possibility. However, it's also possible that a lot of people would be a lot more interested because they're no longer restricted in the number in the half that they can vote for. Obviously, I couldn't predict which way it would go, but I think if people are not faced with the idea of, oh, I've got to write off that half of the booklet because I can't do anything about them anyway, they might well think, okay, who is genuinely the best out of this? You're looking at electing 1 in 4, basically. And when you look at it that way, there's always, I mean, not wishing to be rude, but there are some candidates that get struck off the list immediately. You just put a line through them. And that would apply to a lot of people. There'll be reasons, for whatever reasons there will be, that they won't even consider them. They're not even on the list. So you're probably looking more at choosing 12 people out of perhaps 30, maybe even out of 20, 25. So I don't think for many voters it would be a colossal issue, to be honest.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Siggy.
Much, Mayor Andrew. Thank you so much, Judy, for coming along and for your presentation. Look, I thought like you before I got into council, so I'm with you there, but I changed my mind, of course, since I'm in, because on the inside it looks slightly different than from the outside. But just the question is, because when you go at large, and I just wondered, have you thought about people that have got a high profile, you know, on radio or TV, that we've had in the past? Or people with loads of money because they can afford loads of billboards and stuff, are they really the better people to represent the city and make the right decisions?
Well,
or do they come with their own interests?
We're already having them elected, and yes, they do come with their own interests, and I don't think that is going to change notably by saying vote citywide. There will always be people who have lots of money, lots of vested interests, and a great deal of power compared to some of the other candidates. I don't personally see that changing from 2 wards to a citywide system is going to make a lot of difference to that.
Okay, so I mean, for example, if you're not that well known, you want to go door knocking, and you want to get in there, you know, because you haven't got the amount of money that other people have to spend. Do you find, would that be harder for a candidate?
Again, you're looking at, if people are having to go door knocking, I think the best way is probably through public meetings rather than direct door knocking, because you are looking at a city with many tens of thousands of people, and it is not possible to door knock more than, you know, a couple of thousand of them probably with a lot of hard work. So that is not going to make a heck of a lot of difference, but I do think that there is a huge need for, again, you can't force people to go to public meetings, but to try and hold as many as possible and to try to get as much exposure of all candidates to the public as possible.
That's great. Thank you. The last question, because you're talking a lot about public meetings, and I know that you have attended public meetings in the past, but have you noticed how, I mean, I was actually surprised at the last election how many people turned up to public meetings, while prior I used to go to all of them, and there were more candidates than there were actually people in the public. So how do we get the public to come to the public meetings? You know, if that's something where they can see, of course, the people.
I appreciate your point. I have also commented in past elections, not the most recent one, but in past ones, that there was a very low level of turnout. Again, it's a matter of partly how agitated people are getting about what's going on in their city, and partly how much promotion is being done. It does depend on publicity, obviously. Through local newspapers, through community newspapers, through community groups sort of saying, hey, we need to look at what's going on here, it's important you come along to the meetings. So yeah, there is a responsibility on behalf of the electors as well as of the candidates.
Sure.
Totally
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Siggy. Councillor James.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Judy, for your submission. My question was virtually the same as Siggy's, actually. She stole a bit of thunder there. But, you know, like, would you have, you know, like, if we went citywide, would you have concerns that people with, like you said, a lot of money, name recognition, running, because people, it would be a human trait to vote for people they know, you know, and they could get sports stars and everything else running who could be
it already happens.
thick as a brick, you know,
Yeah, no, it
and
already happens.
they're going to get elected and running the city. So, you know, would you be comfortable with that? Because then you open up, because you wouldn't have normal people like, you know, like the people standing behind you there that would be able to run citywide, you know, because it does get very expensive. I was lucky because I was running just on the the East Ward, and you know, I only spent $700, but usually you have to spend a lot more than that to get into council.
Yes. Again, as I say, this is something that has to be addressed at a more national level, because I think the amount of money that's able to be spent is a huge issue, because it does. It leaves people on anything but a level playing field. And I do think that that applies regardless of whether we have 2 wards or a whole city. We are still going to get people who will stand in a ward. There are going to be wealthy, influential people on the West Ward as well as on the East Ward. And if they want to throw money at it, yes, at the moment, they will probably be the people who get elected. It can't be resolved at this level, obviously. It's something that has to be dealt with at a national level. It would be, I think, highly desirable to try to cut those limits considerably so that there is a much more easy way for people who don't have large resources to actually present themselves on the same footing as the other candidates.
Would you like to see a ban on the smiling face billboards?
To some extent, yes. I think it's reasonable to have people's names up, which is often, I mean, it's the standard thing that's done with, you know, with national government elections, that you'll have a name, vote such and such. I think the large personalised billboards, yes, they'll have a huge influence because people will see a name.
Excuse me, guys, this is getting way off subject. This is covered by national legislation.
Yep.
It's not what this is about today.
Fair enough.
So next question, please.
No, all good. Thank you,
Okay.
Judy.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Judy.
Okay.
Great.
Right, thank you for waiting so patiently, Kelly. Kelly Pike is our last submitter this afternoon. Kelly, you have 5 minutes and the bell will go at 3.
Deborah not having a second crack? No,
I explained just at the beginning that she's,
all right.
yeah.
Thank you.
That long because everything has really been covered. I'm here to ask you to consider citywide voting for 2019, and that's because I want more choice in the candidates. I would like to be able to choose all of you and not just a quarter of you, which is what would happen if we were to look at 4 wards or even 3. That to me would disconnect me a little bit from you as elected members, because I just don't have that choice. I do appreciate the work the Democracy team has done, and of course other submitters, looking at all the data from around the world and around New Zealand. And I can understand that from your point of view, it's very, very even in terms of what the stats say is the best thing to do. So I just wanted to acknowledge that. But I also want you to realise that with the whole 37 submissions that you had, 29 are against the status quo and 8 are for, which means, really, if you're listening to the public, you'll be making a change today and not going with the status quo. I would like to have, sorry, I can't even read my own writing. Hang on. As much as I do want more diversity on this council, I don't believe that increasing the number of wards will really do that. I see that there are reports saying that it does, but I personally don't think that that's going to be the case. I think you just vote in who you're going to vote in. Personally, I'm not going to vote for somebody just because they live next door to me. If Mayor Andrew lived next door to me, I wouldn't vote for him. And I don't think a lot of people think the same way as well. I think the sentence at the top of the candidate booklet saying whether or not you're in the ward or not, people have ignored that, so it's clearly not something that they give a lot of consideration to, which is why I think, again, citywide voting is the right thing to do. As I mentioned, the idea of having just 3 or 4, whatever choices, it's not good enough for me. I don't vote for people based on where I live. I vote based on if they have similar values to me, and I'll pick that up from if they attend maybe an environment group that I'm interested in, or if they go to you know, if they support the arts. They're the things that my communities here in Kirikiriroa, not necessarily my neighbouring streets. And if I have an issue, I'm going to go for the councillor, not necessarily on the West Ward, but the one who I think will help me get what I want. So I really can't read my writing. I am slightly concerned that we're focused so much on candidate spend for decision making on if we have citywide voting or wards. I think you need to take off the candidate hat and use your hat of a voter, like myself. All we care about is good quality candidates and choice. We don't care how much it costs for you to run. Now, I do recognise that there is data saying that people with less money are less likely to be voted on, but I do see that in time that it will change, and so that we will use social media a bit better, which is free. We will connect with communities differently, and I think that will change things. So there'll be less billboards, more social media, and all for media, using free media. I do want to acknowledge that this decision is difficult. It is split, but I would ask for you to push forward the citywide voting to give us as voters choice.
Thank you, Kelly. Councillor Dave.
Kelly, you said, pointed out that most of the submitters, which is a very small number compared with some things like the rubbish and recycling submission with a couple of thousand we had just recently, most of them were against the status quo, but then you didn't immediately, though later you did, acknowledge that actually the reason they were against it were from reasons from both sides of the argument. So why shouldn't I go for, let's say, 4 wards? I'm against the status quo. I'll go for 4 wards.
Why do I not?
Am I fulfilling your wish by doing that?
You know what? As long as you don't go with the status quo today, I'm going to be happy, because it means you're listening to what the submitters have said. I would prefer citywide voting because I want to be able to vote for all of my councillors. I don't want to vote for just a couple of you. I don't think that's fair. So that's why I don't want the wards,
So
if that answers your question.
you also would be even more unhappy then that you can only vote for one person in the general election, for one electorate?
Slightly different, though, I think, to be honest.
Okay. I don't know how, but that's your prerogative.
Well, I get to pick 12 of you, or however many.
You
I see it as different.
2 votes, but
I
for the
look at
electorate,
local and central as different.
you only get 1 vote for the electorate. Anyway, you said you made a statement, you don't care how much it costs the candidates.
Yeah.
But do you care about how much they spend?
Yeah, I definitely think central government needs to be lobbied to reduce the candidate spend. I think that's really important, and I think a lot of the issues that sort of pop up in considering the representation review, they're things that we are not deciding today. They're things that we do need to maybe park and work towards, including spending, including STV voting, all of those things that we aren't talking about today. I think they would make a good impact as well.
Yeah, we had the option for doing STV voting, but that went down in a referendum. Yeah.
Well, hopefully it's readdressed.
So you would support a reduction in campaign spending because you think that makes a difference to who can stand or
I think
who's
it
going to be
evens
successful?
the playing field a little bit. I mean, there are candidates who I know don't have the money to get in who I think would be fantastic. So evening the playing field would help.
So the only way you can do that under the current system was by having smaller wards. Is it?
Yeah, but see, that takes away the choice from voters like me.
So we're weighing up.
Yeah, we are, and I can see, reasons for or against. I can see both. But for me, I just want choice. I want the best quality candidates representing me in my city. That means being able to vote for all of them.
Thanks.
Councillor Gary.
Thank you. I just want to be a bit careful because the spending thing is not actually part of the scope today, is it?
No.
It is in the sense of the ward size. Different ward sizes have different spending limits.
Okay,
So
in terms
Gary,
of...
the reason I'm letting it go is because the reason I'm letting the spending talk go is because it's heavily weighs the way that's set up, how many wards you have as to how much you get to spend, so it lowers it, so it is a part of the decision making.
Okay, I understand what you're saying. It's not a direct thing, but it's a flow-on
It's a direct thing that does affect it, yes.
Okay. So the issue, so you raised the issue about, just one of your good presentations, you talked about that, was in some situations the only way a non-radio personality or non-ex-All Black or non-famous person can get elected is if they spend a lot of money. Because the
Not
other person's got
necessarily.
already got their profile. Yeah.
Look, I know that it could be, it's a lot harder if you don't have the money, but in saying that, from my perspective as a voter, not a candidate, I would say that there are ways that you can be more creative. Max Coyle nearly got on council and he didn't spend anything. So it can be done. I think it means connecting with your neighbours organically and really knowing them. And yeah, use free media, social media. I think there are ways that you can do it.
Okay, thank you. And the question, and this again is a little bit tangential, but I'll try and bring it in scope. Everyone's talked about diversity. My understanding is diversity just means differences.
Yeah, okay.
Is that what we're talking about?
I guess.
And it's to do with, and it's related to, whether we're wards or overall city stuff. Does being elected from a ward make you less likely to consider the overall city, or does being elected at large, across the whole city, make you less likely to care about a certain suburb?
I don't think I've understood you very well, so I'll just say this. For me, diversity is socio-economic and it's ethnicity, and it's also getting more females around this table. In terms of how people vote, I believe, without doing a whole heap of research, because I don't have time for that, that there is an unconscious bias where people tend to vote for people that look powerful or well-connected or put together, and they unconsciously vote for those people, which unfortunately is not for the good of getting diversity around that table. So that is something that needs addressed, but I don't think that increasing the number of wards will necessarily improve diversity. I strongly don't think that, because you'll still get the same people voted in anyway. It might make it slightly easier, but yeah, much of a muchness in terms of...
So it's your contention that people are voting, but they don't understand why they're voting?
Well, gosh.
Well, unconscious bias, what does that mean?
Oh, no, well, I guess it's a psychological term, and that's the psychology thing coming out. But it's just where I think people don't realise... I don't want to say that people don't know who they are voting for, but I do think at the back of their mind, without them realising it, they might be voting for somebody based on who fits their picture of who a politician is, for example. It's not a really big issue for this.
Sorry, okay, so I'm just trying to... So how does that... Because I thought it was... Diversity was about my suburb versus the whole city, which is in scope for what we're talking about today. But are you talking about something different now?
I mean, when I'm thinking of diversity, that's not so much the way that I think.
Well, you were here when the big group spoke, and I think that's what they meant by diversity is...
But when I say I want diversity around the table, it's not necessarily based on a neighbourhood, it's based on demographics or ethnicity, female, that sort of thing, not so much neighbourhoods. That, to me, isn't so much of a priority.
Is that more important than intent and ability and competence and things like that?
No, it's all on merit. Yeah, it's all on merit. I'm not going to vote for somebody just because they are a female. That would be crazy, but...
I'm sorry, but you just kind of said you wanted more of that.
Well, then I'm not saying things clearly then.
No, Gary, she did qualify it by saying in the end it is merit as a part of the equation. So I think that's summed up.
Thank you. Thanks for your submission.
Councillor Angela.
Thanks, Mayor Andrew. Thanks, Kelly, for your submission. I just needed to clarify that because you said a couple of statements towards the end that are in conflict with each other. You said that for you, diversity is related to socio-economic. The previous submissions from the Eastward by-election candidates talked a lot about the barriers for a whole lot of sectors in terms of the financial barrier in running a campaign. So how would whole of city, if it excludes a whole lot of those socio-economic groups, still improve diversity?
Well, they're kind of separate issues. I mean, I think for wanting citywide voting is because it gives me choice, but when we're voting citywide, it's up to the people voting to decide who gets in there. And so the only way you're going to get diversity, however you want to look at it around this table, is to have more people participating in the process. I don't think an increase of wards is going to do that.
But can't that also occur with more wards attracting simply more candidates, which
That's
will
if
attract
that-
a bigger
if-
spread, which will attract more choice?
Yeah, I think, but that's another if, and we don't know that. We don't know that there will be more quality candidates standing in all of the wards.
And we wouldn't know that with
We don't know any of
citywide
this
either.
stuff. We're sitting around here talking hypotheticals because we don't. There are arguments for and against. It's very evenly split. As I mentioned, the only thing that is clear is that people have asked you not to go with the status quo based on just the submissions for this particular review, which I acknowledge was only 37.
Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Martin.
Let me give you a real-life example. In 1986, we moved from the at-large to 5 wards. I'll give you 2 examples. Let's talk gender balance. One of those candidates was
Deputy
Councillor...
Mayor.
This is very relevant in terms of diversity.
Are you heading to a question?
Yes, I am heading to a question. Councillor Pitahira Kaio from Frankton, trade unions, worked from the post office, elected to council. Councillor Philippa Mahut, prominent in her school, Hillcrest Normal School Committee, came from the Hillcrest area in separate wards. If I said there's some evidence that shows we do get better gender balance and with 5 wards, would you be open to that? So what I'm trying to get is what for you, do you want choice or do you want diversity?
I want choice, and through more people participating in the process, you'll get the diversity. If you've got more people voting, they will vote for people who represent them.
So if I can spend up to my limit of $60,000 across a whole city and say to a campaign agent, run me a campaign, you won't see me at your environment meetings or any of those meetings, run me a campaign, send me the check, I'll put the check in the mail, it's all over, versus the person, say, like Pitahira Kaio from Frankton, who probably wouldn't have had a hope in Haley's of doing citywide at that time. Would you
So, Deputy Mayor.
Look, I'm not completely against increasing the wards. I'm just saying my preference is citywide voting, so it gives me personally choice.
I mean, I obviously have an open
Deputy
mind.
Mayor, it's not our job
but
to
I'm
change
just trying to,
the speaker's mind.
So if you rank, so what I'm hearing is that you prefer the issue of you having a choice across a whole city is more important than sort of necessarily having a system that may deliver more diversity.
May deliver more diversity. There's no guarantees it will deliver more diversity. If you said for sure that it will improve diversity, I'd go with more wards, but I don't think it will.
Right.
Or we don't know that, so I'm going to go with choice.
So the evidence out. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Mark.
Just briefly, you were talking about profile earlier on, which I find interesting. Margaret Evans, for example, was in radio before she got on. Was she good mayor?
I don't know, I didn't live here, actually.
Okay, yeah, okay, good.
She's a good person, so
Yeah. All right.
The thing that I like about the media profile is it means people feel like they can access you and they feel that they know you, and I think that's a good thing, because if people think they know the person representing them, they'll reach out if they need something.
Yeah.
And they know where you stand on things, they might know what you're like personally, and I think that helps them to connect to you as a councillor.
So would there be high-profile people in Hamilton that you wouldn't vote for?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, good. Thank you. That'll be me. Can I be excused? Yeah, I have to leave early. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you. Thank you, Jim.
We'll just take you as an apology. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Paula.
Thank you, Mayor Andrew. Just going back to my question, so the relativity between a merit skill approach to candidates and the ability to harness local knowledge and local experience, can I have a comment on how you feel about those? Or do you feel, I mean, and I'll ask the same question that I asked previously of other candidates, if it, by some quirk of fate, all 12 of the candidates were either east side or west side, doesn't really matter, but they were one or the other, would that be acceptable?
It's just, well, I know this sounds quite blunt, but it's just how it is. It wouldn't be ideal, of course, but we should have the right to vote for who we want to vote for, and if we happen to vote for people who live on River Road, as bad as it sounds for me, the people voted. That's what the decision was.
Okay, so the other, I've been listening to all of the arguments and I think it's been quite fascinating. The other part that interests me is the difference between what is helpful for a voting perspective. In other words, what's going to encourage more people to vote or make them feel empowered to vote or listen to in the voting process. And then, as if they're exactly the same thing, representation. So voting is the one point in time you vote someone on. Following on from that, you've got 3 years of representation. So what do you believe would be the best outcome for ongoing representation, not just the initial period of voting?
Oh, the thing that I hear most loud and clear is that people don't think that you guys listen to them. That seems to be the biggest thing, and so that's the one thing that I think councillors should be trying to remedy as best as they can.
Okay, so but back on this particular topic then, how do we design a representation system that allows for that with what you're saying, with either approach, whether at large or in wards? What is going to improve that out of those two models or those three models that we have?
Oh gosh, well, I wish I knew. I find the engagement part of things and people feeling like they're represented well really difficult. It's a difficult subject. Nobody has the answer, and I think it was quite clear with all of the research the democracy team did. We don't have all of those answers. So
I was just interested because we've had conversations through your radio show and so on about representation before, but what makes the difference in terms of how we set up the structure to get people voted on in terms of quality representation? Because I've heard a number of comments around the cost, and you said you don't care about the cost of campaigning.
Don't care is quite harsh. I mean, obviously it is a huge factor, and it's one that ultimately made me decide not to run in 2016. And so, it is a factor, but it's just one. There are lots and lots of different things. I'm not convinced that how the structure of how we vote and anything the council can do is going to make a big difference. I think it's going to need to come from our communities and society and changing the way that they view democracy and civic participation and all that sort of thing.
Cool.
I'm just not
trying to get
convinced.
a sense of what's most important, how people get voted on, or how easy it is to stand for election and those kind of things, versus what is the most effective representation unit once you've been voted on, how we get effective representation of the widest community?
Well, again, I think it's just communicating with people. The meetings Judy mentioned, actually being there and listening.
Yeah, and I'm sorry
That's
you're getting the
about
harder questions, but I
No,
think
that's
as
fine.
we're cumulatively gathering up all the debates, so trying to weigh that up. Thank you.
Councillor Siggy.
Thank you, Mayor Andrew, and thank you so much, Kelly, for your presentation. Look, I do like the word unconscious bias, and you're totally right. I was told that, oh, you look fine, I'll vote for you. And I said, do you want to know any more? They said, no, fine. So it is that, you look successful. Yeah, I know, big mistake. Thank you, Dave. But whatever. But one of the things I wanted to ask you is, because if we go citywide and we've got 40, 50, 60 candidates, who has got the most time to read through the whole booklet?
Yeah, I know that will make it a slower process, but there also might be benefits to it where people get to vote for the people they wanted to vote for. I live in Hamilton West. I would have loved to have voted for Hamilton East councillors.
Really?
Candidates.
Really?
The candidates I felt were higher quality, so it was frustrating for me to not be able to vote for them. So
I'm so sorry
Yeah.
that we are so low, such bad quality.
No, I didn't
that's
mean it
fine.
like that. You know what I mean? It's like there were lots that I really did support, like Nick Johnston, like Anna Casey Cox, who I would love to see here today. They're not, but I couldn't vote for them. I lived on the wrong side of the river. So.
Yeah. No, thank you so much. That's great. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly. And I just want to commend you on your passion for spreading the word on local government and helping people to understand what's going on and how it works. So,
I can understand
well
it,
done you. Well, you really have got a handle on it, and
Thanks.
well done. Okay, so I need feedback now for the democracy manager from each of you, so that they can put their report together for the 1st of November when we make our decision. So I'd like to hear from each person around the table, because it is important that democracy can sum up in their report and cover off where we are Yeah, so I'm just going to take one of you at a time. So whoever's ready first. Thank you, Councillor Angela.
Mayor Andrew, I'm ready. I just have two requests to be included in the report. One of the was that if we can find them, the staff reports from when Councillor McPherson was talking about when there was a previous mayor, from when council moved from the, was it 3 to 2? If we can find some of that information, that would be really helpful. And one of the submitters asked, Matthew, I think, asked about that one, the reasons for that. And the second one, that the report does talk or speak in somehow through the deliberations to the for council to make the decision based on all of the feedback, because I have a sense from some of the submitters that they feel we are only restricted to making a decision based on the formal consultation, and that's not, that would be not correct. So I would like the report to speak to some of that as well. And that's all. Thank you.
Councillor Dave.
Yeah, it's sort of along the lines of same lines as Angela. I was just thinking of someone else at the time. Some information on the local government commission, I think it was, their decision to overturn the 1998 council decision, or 1997 council decision, to go from 5 wards to city at large, and to install a hybrid 3-ward system. Some of their reasoning, official reasoning back then. And perhaps the submissions, there was a large community group submission led by Puketi Neighbourhood House at the time that went to both the council and the commission. Be just available for information perhaps, and to check whether it's permissible on the 1st of November to move a proposal for a 4-ward system based on the discussion that's here today, even though it wasn't in one of the options put out by staff, but it was discussed today with each of the submitters one way or another.
So, yes, the difficulty, the opportunity that presents, and one of the reasons why we're interested in your feedback, is essentially the proposal that comes forward on the 1st of November will be a single proposal, effectively. So we need to have a sense in which
yes,
of
but
the
I'm
direction you want to travel. So if I
point
produce
D with an possible amendment.
Yeah. So what we might do is we have a briefing opportunity between now and then, so there may be an opportunity to collect the information that you're talking about and share it with elected members so that we can fully inform the report that comes on the 1st of November. Yep. Yeah, but certainly that can be on the table in terms of both what we've heard and through the process anyway.
Thanks.
Just going back to you, Angela, was there a specific system that you want the reports?
No,
You know,
no. But I'm just wondering, based on the advice that we have had around the judicial reviews and things like that, if what I've asked for in for the second thing that I asked for, that the report speaks to guiding elected members and to be able to take in a whole of consultation approach, not just to the 36 people. Are we actually able to do that at this point?
So what we're required to do, and I'm looking at Brendan because he'll keep me legally safe here, won't you, Brendan, is that if we amend the initial proposal that we consulted on, we need to have an evidence base for that, which is grounded in what we've heard today, but which is also consistent with and aligned to the information that you have already received.
Right. Okay.
So it would be helpful for governance unit to understand whether or not there is likely to be a shift from the initial proposal and thinking from that which was included in the initial proposal, so that that can be built in and incorporated in the report that we bring on the 1st of November.
But we are able to change from the original proposal because we are able to take in all of the consultation. With
That-
all
that's
the phone, the online, which was hundreds of people, not
Yep.
just 36
Not
people.
just 36, that's
Okay,
correct.
but we are having a briefing, so we can have a look at that and indicate then to
Yes,
help
if you're
inform
not
the
able to
report.
kind of.
Because I haven't digested everything the
sure.
submitters said today.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Councillor Jeff?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Andrew. Yeah, look, I think I would just signal that for me, today's submissions or hearing the submissions has just made me have another think about additional wards, and I will go back and have another look at the information we've received to date on the possibility of a third or even a third and fourth ward, and just have another think about that, and so I guess any extra information we can get on that would be helpful to me, whether or not we're talking northern wards or southern wards or whatever. But it certainly just made me pause for more thought on that and want to do some more thinking. Yeah, thank you.
Deputy Mayor Martin?
It would be quite interesting to get a timeline, because obviously in 1986 that was the first election with the 5-ward system, which was imposed by government legislation at the time, and how we went from 5 to 3 to 2. So I think just as a timeline, whether that actually will inform us around the diversity of people who were elected. The other thing is, could you, if in fact we've put out a proposal which is essentially what we have at present, if we then are minded to change that, be it to 3 wards or at large or whatever, can you just remind us of some of the legal, there's some series of, it has to be some sort of evidence-based process, not just, I think this is a good idea at the time.
That's absolutely correct, Deputy Mayor. There needs to, whatever the final proposal is that Council approves, and we must have a final proposal by the 5th of November.
Mm-hmm.
So that's an important aspect of the timeline. Whatever the final proposal that we agree is, it needs to be absolutely informed by evidence through the whole through all stages of the process, and we have to be clear and seen to have dealt consistently with the information that we've received from submitters. If the final approval, once notified directly after we make a decision, if there's a month period in which we can receive appeals or objections, if none are received, then that final proposal is in fact the system that is in place for the 2019 elections. If we did receive an appeal or a proposal in that month period, then the decision is made by the local government commission. It doesn't come back to us, and this is where we're provided to provide all the evidence, the process that we've been through, in order to substantiate the decision that we have made. And hence our continued kind of emphasis on the fact that any decision must be evidence-led, and that evidence must take into account the whole of the process that we've been through 18 months.
So not just the public submissions, but the original work that you've done?
Yes, and those, you'll recall that, and we've mentioned it in the report at points. Let me find it somewhere. There are 3 things that it's really important that councillors, there are 3 dimensions. Oh, here is point 15. There are 3 factors that you're required to consider in determining an appropriate, effective and fair representation. And we have, through our process, covered all aspects of those 3 factors, of which the extent to which the public identifies communities of interest is one factor. There are other factors such as that there is a logical flow to the city, that you're confident as elected members that you're providing appropriate and fair coverage, that our city infrastructure, if you like, supports what we've identified as our communities of interest. And the options that we have talked about over the process are options that we believe are consistent with those.
So that community of interest notion is evidence-based, like car journeys, house to work, schools. Is that what we're talking about?
And
So I'm not being
and
disrespectful of the
feedback.
submissions
No, not
today,
at
but
all.
I'm just wanting to make sure that from a local government commission, obviously there's a totality of evidence,
Yes.
and that would include the work that you as staff have done, particularly around those definitions of communities of interest.
That's correct.
Right. The other thing is, I think it would be a good idea that if we move and look at the at-large, we delineate and we know exactly what we're dealing with in terms of some of the campaign, current legislation around campaign spend. What difference might there be with that, quite apart from ballot papers, but and also, what are the thresholds for campaign spend increase or reduction would be. I think that would be, just to, I know you've said it before, but when we move to the discussion, we should remind ourselves.
Yep. So we do have the
of that.
information here, but it's
Yeah.
probably more appropriate that it's circulated with everything else, so we can include that.
Yeah.
Councillor Siggy.
Thank you, Mayor Andrew. I'm sort of, because Deputy Mayor and I, we're floating at the first initial briefing about the 3 wards, and I'm still keen on that. I'm sorry, I might have missed it. Did we ever have a proper map with the boundaries if we went for 3 wards, where the boundaries would be exactly, or? Oh, am I blind? Sorry, I am blind. Sorry, yep. Oh God, I'm blind. 31. Yeah, I got it right in front of me. Thank you, thank you. No, actually, no, it wasn't 3. It was 4. Sorry, that's why I'm 4. I saw the 3. Okay. Sorry, 4 wards.
So you'll recall that, and in the documentation there were a series of options that we put forward, which included 2 or 3 configurations for 4 wards.
Yeah. Okay, I need to look back on that.
Yes, noting that, as Councillor McPherson suggested at the time, there might be scenarios where we would have to get special permission to go with certain 4 ward structures because of the population spread.
Okay, thank you, thank you.
Councillor Robb.
Thanks, Chair. I'm concerned that we've got a very small number of submitters to this representation review, but certainly not concerned about the quality of the submissions, which are really showing up the weaknesses with the present preferred option. I think the presentations today and the rest of the submissions that I've read suggest that there are some strong and well thought through arguments to support alternatives.
Sorry, point of order. I hate doing this to my good friend Councillor Pascoe, but we're not actually here, we're not legally allowed to debate, and I feel like he slipped into debate. I was under the instruction that this is a round table. What do we want to see in the report? Happy to be corrected, but
Yes, you are correct, Councillor Angela.
All right. Okay. Well, I'll go back and I will congratulate the submitters on the quality of their arguments. I guess one of the concerns I've got, which I'd like to see in the report, is that we don't ignore the submissions that have come through today, because this council has, during my period of time sitting around this table, generally ignored overwhelming views when the public have been asked to consult. So I think we should be quite serious about taking into account these areas, because I think if there is an objection or appeals, then the LGC will look at the strength of the arguments that we've heard today.
Can I just hand over to democracy? Sorry to interrupt, but it isn't debate. So
Actually, genuine question, Councillor Pascoe. So when you say it's important that we don't ignore the submissions, we're at your direction in terms of which aspects of the submissions and which submissions you would like us to pay attention to as a project team.
Okay. All right. Well, I'll go for third attempt now. Third attempt to get my view across as to what I'm not going to say today what I think. I'm really looking for some direction from democracy, having heard what we've heard today. But there are a couple of things that have come through in themes from a number of the submitters, which are not really relevant to this review, that I think we should also take on board, not for the 1st of November report, but, and these are the campaign spends, which the Deputy Mayor has already referred to, the fact that residents would like to see council candidates coming from living within the city and living within wards if we end up with wards. And the third area of concern that seems to run through this theme is the use of chairs casting votes. And I know that there's a review on at the moment in respect to standing orders, and that third area could be covered off as part of that review.
Point of order, that is nothing to do with anything that has come up today or in this whole subject. That is a totally separate issue, should be struck from the record.
I have, Chair...
can I just interrupt you, please?
So-
What we're here for today is to give democracy a steer on any further information that you want included in the report that's coming back on the 3rd of November. And this isn't the forum to bring up any of those 3 points. That is beyond the scope of what this committee can do on this paper. So what we want is a bit of a steer on whether you around the choices that we have on a 2-ward, a all-ward, a 3-ward, and what further information you'd like back from democracy when they write their report to come back for us to make a final decision on. And that's what today's for. So can you start again on the 4th attempt?
My 4th attempt.
I do understand the concerns with the other things, but this isn't the forum.
And I made that very clear that I did not expect this to be part of the report back, but they are 3 themes that came through, and unless we address them now, nothing will happen in my view. I haven't got anything further to say. I guess I'll be dependent on the analysis that comes through.
I apologise because I suspect that I haven't been clear enough. And in terms of what I need, if I can speak just bluntly so that you know what it is I'm looking for, I need to know if you have heard something today that has prompted you to seek some more information or to direct me to do more work with a view to potentially changing or to inform the decision about whether or not you stay with the initial proposal that we went out to consult on, or whether on the basis of what you have heard today, there is sufficient argument to persuade you that we should look at something else. So I can provide you with additional information, ultimately, and quite clearly, because this is the foremost governance matter that you will ever be asked to determine. What you want us to pay attention to must come from the elected members. We've done the work to date to put the information in front of you. If you'd like us to focus particularly on a few things, to provide more information, such as Councillor O'Leary and Councillor McPherson have asked around additional information around ward structures and background to those things, we can do that. But staff will not be making, I want to be really clear, staff will not be making a recommendation in the final report. That final report should come to you more or less in a format which you will approve or not approve as a final point.
Okay, in one sentence then, I would like to see further information, having become a little more convinced that our present recommended approach has got significant weaknesses when compared to the submissions which I have read and heard today.
So is there a particular model that you'd like more information on, councillor?
Well, yeah, either at large or increasing the number of wards.
Councillor Ryan.
Thanks. I was just a bit confused after Rob's 3 or 4 point of orders there and cherry picking of items.
So, Councillor Ryan, to be really clear, we've consulted on
I'm
a
clear.
2-ward system.
I'm clear.
Okay.
I just got a bit caught
Thank
up in the dizziness there. Yeah. I acknowledge our verbal submissions today, but to answer the direction from governance here, when we look at what was a fairly comprehensive investigation, albeit not necessarily the response and uptake we would have liked, aka civic engagement, one of our challenges. We had 8 status quo, 8 at large and 8 for more wards. I went into this with a leaning towards the at large process, but based on what I've seen from the report.
Hang on, sorry, we're not debating.
No, I'm not debating. I'm
Okay.
giving her a steer based on the
thank
evidence
you.
I've received.
Yeah, thank you.
So based on the response that I've seen, the submissions that we've received, the verbal that I've heard, you guys finished?
Yeah, keep going.
I'm not seeing a compelling reason to change the status quo. We have to be careful here as elected members not to cherry pick.
Hang on. You're not trying to convince your colleagues. You're feeding information through to Leanne on where you are at the moment with an open mind still to what comes back in the last paper. Yes. So you're not trying to convince any of the fellow members. You're asking Leanne.
Leanne, I'll speak to her directly.
Thank you.
Based on what we've seen and heard, I can see no compelling reason to deviate.
Hang on.
Perhaps I can
Sorry.
help Councillor
Yeah,
Ryan. What I'm
yeah,
hearing
yeah,
you say is
you've got
that
to
you're
have an open mind.
satisfied that the information that has been provided to you covers the things that you're interested in.
You don't need any further information, is that what you're saying?
Correct.
Thank you. Councillor Gary.
I just want to ask a question coming at this from another angle. I think we've addressed this primarily, or we should have addressed it, looking at it from the point of view of the representees, I think would be the right word, the people, yeah. But it is just as valid to look at it because I just want to make sure we don't make any barriers to stop people from standing. So I don't know if that was part of what we're supposed to do, but we certainly have gone out to the public and said, what do you want? You want to be represented? How do you want to be represented? The other side of that coin is making sure that there aren't barriers to stop people from standing. And it's probably bloody too late.
So Gary,
yeah.
Is there further information that you want to satisfy yourself on that area?
Yeah, well, I just want to know that, and look, I can't remember the questions that we asked, so that we have kind of looked at it that way as well. So, and that might be out of order, I don't know.
So that's up to you if you need further information on that to satisfy,
okay. Can I ask Leanne then?
your...
Okay, Leanne, if someone from up on high said, you guys have made this decision completely ignoring the fact that it's impossible for anyone who's not a bloody good radio player or a really good radio announcer or a good rugby player to get on the council or a multi-millionaire, you've made sure that the only people who can get on there are celebrities or millionaires. You can't do this. So therefore we will overturn your recommendation.
So can I just ask you to rephrase your swear word?
Bloody is not a swear.
Gary, it's not
Cut your
acceptable
neck,
in here.
it's bloody. A blimmin' good rugby player or an outstanding radio announcer or a goodness knows what else.
At its most simple, you are required to make a decision that ensures that the community and the mechanisms by which you believe that will most likely to ensure fair and effective representation for your communities. That would include, in my view, anything that you perceive to be a barrier to fair representation and the ability of people to stand and represent their communities. So
Okay,
the
no,
fact that it's not a case of looking at it from the voter perspective or the councillor perspective, those things are completely interwoven
And they are,
in my room.
they are in some respects both the same, different sides of the same coin, yeah. Thank you.
Councillor Paula.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor Andrew. I would like some further information on a couple of things. If we go down the 3-ward scenario, we've had a few arguments raised around cost for running for election. Should you be 3 wards versus 2 wards versus 1? I would like to know in each instance what that looks like in terms of budget implications for those candidates willing to stand in those wards. Sorry?
Yes, keep going.
Yeah, so that's quite clear, yeah? So that just not that it would be the only weighting factor, but it was raised, and I'm not sure. And also, if we went away from 2 wards to 3 wards, would there be any obligation, rather either required or just even a sort of a moral obligation to talk further with the northern ward, which would be most affected by this, because they'd be east and west come together? It's different than.
So I can answer that question now. So there is no further opportunity to consult. The decision you make on the 1st of November will be your final proposal. So if you choose to change amend the initial proposal on the basis of what you have heard today, you need to be confident that position is
to go away
basis
from
on
the
which
2.
you make that decision is robust enough.
To go away from what we've decided.
Exactly. Thank you.
Okay. In just a more global question about process, Leanne, in the case that we all recognise that we've had quality submissions, but very low submissions, very low input into this, is there ever a time or threshold of such poor input from the public that you would decide to delay making a decision and try some better forms of engagement with your community to get further input? Does that happen? I mean, I know this is it's just extremely, extremely low.
There's 2 parts to your question, I think, Councillor Southgate, and I'll take it as a hypothetical scenario.
Yeah.
We're not necessarily talking about this one, although I would make the point with this one that there is no time. So you as a council made a decision to push the process out a little bit so that the public, quite rightly, weren't trying to deal with 10-year plan and the wider representation review at the same time. And that has now meant that we're up against a legislative time deadline of the 5th of November. Okay. But typically, staff are at the service of elected members in terms of how much, how often, in terms of consultation that you think should be undertaken. And if you thought there was a case for further consultation in general terms at any point, then of course staff would entertain that. I think though, and I take a little bit of liberty as governance manager to say at this point, the process we went through for consultation with this process was very robust in the context of local government and in the context of engagement we do within this council. It is hard to imagine what else we could have done without sitting back and redesigning systems, which I think is fundamentally what we have all been talking about a little bit, things that are in scope, out of scope, what sits with central government, what sits here. But I wouldn't want anyone to think that in making this decision that you have not been provided with the best possible information.
I'm not saying that, but I'm saying that because I know that staff have worked really, really hard inside the constraints that they had, so this is no reflection on that, but we must all be disappointed with the low levels of return on this, and we were just talking yesterday about community engagement. I am asking how we can get some better input into this, if there was any way, but I think you've answered my question by saying if we had more time, potentially we could, but we don't. We have the 5th of November deadline.
Well, I don't even think it's just about more time, Councillor Southgate. It is fundamentally about the processes that I've mentioned before in terms of, and a lot of our submitters have also hit on, we need to improve civic engagement generally. We need to remind and help voters understand the importance of actively participating in local democracy. We need to make it easier as a whole of organisation and sector approach for people to engage with local government. And we have to remind people of the value of council so that they understand the relevance of inputting into and being part of the decisions that we collectively make. And first and foremost, we need to help people understand how important it is to have the people that they do feel represent them around the table, which circles us right back round to this conversation. It's a big topic.
And I am talking about that broader engagement, not what staff have or haven't done around this process, because they've done their best work in the time given. I was just asking hypothetically, but you've given me the deadline of 5th of November. Hypothetically, if a input was so equal that it was impossible to make, any meaningful interpretation from that, if you had more time, you could redesign something you potentially could. Maybe not in this case, but you could.
Yep. Well, not in this case and not in any similar case to this. We have gone through a bespoke process that's required under legislation. We have followed that to the letter of the law. We have gone beyond that in terms of encouraging opportunities for engagement, and we now have the outcome of that process, which is in front of you. And I have to say again, it's for you to meaningfully interpret the information that you now have in front of us and provide my team and I with the direction as to what happens next.
So my final question then is, where was I going with that? So if that's the case, oh no, don't worry, I'll just leave it as it is. Yeah. Place, isn't it?
Councillor Leo.
Yeah, look, I'll try and get through this without getting a point of order. Rob, you got 3 and I hope I don't get 4 because I'm a little bit worried actually because one, I'm over 65, I'm a male, I own my own home and I live in the north but on the west side of the river. So I'm sort of a bit gone already, aren't I? Yeah. But one thing I did pick up, and it was not from the submitters but from Councillor Dave, and he alluded to when Michael Redmond was the mayor, he was proposing a council at large. If the information is still available on that, as to why we finished up with 2 from that proposal, I'd be interested in that.
Thank you, Councillor Chairman. That's what Councillor McPherson asked for, so we'll make sure we provide it. And Councillor O'Leary. Both of you, sorry.
Deputy Mayor Martin.
Yeah, sorry, just a couple of things I forgot to mention. I guess your report is 3 bits. What are things that have to be rightfully a part of a submission as to general change of law, and without getting into points of order, while there's a belief that people should live in their particular ward, the electoral evidence suggests that people
It's completely out of scope.
Yeah,
Deputy
it's
Mayor.
out of
Sorry
scope.
to interrupt, but I'll just make that very clear. It's
Councillor
we
Jones.
won't be commenting on it.
Can
We
I
will
just,
not be
may I
comment-
finish? Councillor Pascoe added about some submissions apart from this to a review, to government, nothing to do with this exercise. So that's all I'm trying to get is delineation. And secondly, also, as I've raised with you and other colleagues, without prejudging where this debate's going to go, just to remind councillors what advice they can give to a future council to in other words, the law says we have to do this every 6 years. Obviously, I would still be every 6 years. The council still has an option to recommend to the next council a certain direction of travel, i.e. gathering more evidence, whatever. And I've raised that, and I would be interested in that. What we can and can't do without in any way interfering in this, there's a determination, but we may or may not have views for a future council to pick up in terms of the shape of this.
Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Leanne. I think I've got the gist of this, so I'll make it short. I've not heard or read anything, any additional information that would convince me to ask for any more information from governance.
Good. is succinct. Move the staff recommendation number 2 on page 6.
Yeah, I'll second if you're ready. It's just to receive the report.
Okay. There's no debate, so all those for, any against? Carried. Okay, so now where we're at is Leon's team will come back with the reports for November. Yeah, briefing beforehand, and then the outcome of that sets the next election, the process for the next election, the number of wards for the next election. So I'll move to go into public excluded. Moved by Councillor James, seconded by Councillor Jeff. All those for? Any against? Carried. Okay, we'll come back at 20 past. Thank you.